I am one that believes that all religions teach peace and goodness, and it doesn't really matter which one you follow. We will all go to heaven if we do good. I know Muslims don't believe the same about other religions, and sometimes I think this is a shame. Can you respond?
I just attended a conference 2 weeks ago in the University of Michigan, the issue of salvation in Islam versus the other religions. So I was one of the presenters at the conference as well. And it was all about the perspectives that Muslims have regarding salvation. And truth be told, there are multiple perspectives. And it is not fair to simply say, my opinion is right, everybody else's is wrong or whatnot. There are multiple perspectives, and there were a number of people at the conference who presented their viewpoints, some of which argued for a pluralistic understanding of Islam. I, on the other hand, argued for a different understanding of Islam. And in a nutshell, I said that our religion is based upon two basic testimonies. The testimony of there's only one God, and that is Allah, that is God, and the testimony that our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the final messenger of God. And it is essential to believe in these two testimonies and live a good life. You see, we don't dissociate faith from action. What the modern understanding is, or a lot of humanists say, if you're simply good, you will go to heaven. Well, we believe as Muslims, if you're good and you have good faith, if your actions are good and your faiths are good. And that is why the Quran always says, Iman and Amal Salih. You must have faith and you must do good deeds together. And we say that any person who is sincere and who is exposed to the teachings of Islam will find the truth in Islam. However, this doesn't mean that every single non-Muslim is going to go to hell. This is wrong. That's not what we say as Muslims. Rather, we say that only Allah, only God knows the hearts of the people. And only Allah Azza wa Jal knows whether this person has been exposed to Islam or not. It is very possible that a person has not heard of Islam at all, and he or she has lived a good life, and because of that, Allah will forgive them and cause them to enter paradise. It is also possible, and Al-Ghazali and others mention this, and this is also the standard position of Ibn Taymiyyah and others, that a person has not heard of Islam properly. In other words, he's heard a distorted version of Islam. In other words, all he's heard is Islam is terrorism, Islam is violence, this and that. And he or she was never exposed to true Islam. And he or she tried to live their lives in accordance with what they believed was morally right. They were faithful to Allah and they were good to human beings. It is also possible that this person will be forgiven. The one caveat that we have, if a person understands the truth of the message and he knows the prophetic guidance and he knows the reality of this man, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and knowing the truth still decides to reject, that is where I think I would be with the majority of Muslim scholars here. We would say, no, that person technically would not have any hope. However, only God decides. We do not have the right to stamp anybody as going to heaven or hell. No Muslim can say that just because I'm a Muslim, I'm going to heaven. No, that doesn't work that way. Rather, we say we hope we're going to heaven. No Muslim can say, because you're not a Muslim, you are going to hell. Not at all, it doesn't work that way. Only Allah judges individuals. We judge generalities. So we say the general rule is that if you're a pious Muslim, you will get to heaven, and I hope I'm a pious Muslim. And the general rule, if you reject Islam, knowing what Islam is, you will not get into heaven. These are general rules. There are many exceptions, and God will give those exceptions according to His wisdom, and that's something that we trust in His fairness and His judgment.
Thank you. Sometimes my non-Muslim friends tell me
inventions, new thought, new environment. But if we take the Quran and apply it, understand it and apply it in that context, then we find what we are living in today in this modern society is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam 1400 years ago. I'll give an example. In Surah Al-Dhariyat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. Look at yourselves. Don't you see the power of God in your creation? So how did they look at themselves 1400 years ago? 1400 years ago, all they look at their faces. We are all sitting in this room. We are all creation of Allah Almighty, and we all look different. Bring another several hundred people, several thousand people, several million people, several billion people, our faces look different. وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. So 1400 years ago, their understanding was our faces are different, our complexions are different. We know for the past 4 or 5 decades that things have changed when we look at this verse now. The same verse we look at, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ, we start realizing that at this little area here on our thumb, we are different from one another. So when you are making a specific identification, maybe 40, 50 years ago, they start looking at your thumbprint, and we're all different. Not only our faces now, our thumbprint are different. Then came another technology that looked a little deeper in the cell of the human, and we find something called DNA. We still read the verse, وَفِي أَنفُسِكُمْ أَفَلَا تُبْصِرُونَ. So as modernity, technology, everything is progressing, the Quran is moving ahead of them. The Quran is moving ahead of them. And we can take verses after verses after verses. And with the question of women beating and women being abused, you have to look at the context, because a word is not a law is not taken in isolation and then make general statements out of it. And I think this is one of the sicknesses of both the Muslims and the non-Muslims when they read the Quran, because I can read a verse and the Quran says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ, and I stop and I say, woe unto those who pray. I read nothing before it, I read nothing after it. I don't even go to see what the Prophet ﷺ would have guided us to what this verse means. And I can quote, there is a verse in the Quran says that woe unto those who pray, and therefore you should not be praying. And very often these verses, whether it's women, whether it is jihad, whether it is slavery, we take them out of the context and then start generalize them in a way that society will, it will become very repugnant. That, wow, women are being beaten? Well, who is our best role model? The Prophet ﷺ. He has never lifted his hand a single day and strike a woman. So if you're talking about role model, how we understand, how we interpret that. And secondly, when we talk of, even to those scholars who said a beating, it is with a miswak, darbun ghayru mubarrih. It is what you call symbolic act of letting them know that you're angry, just like a child. You don't take a big wood and beat your child, but just your single finger, you can say, Abdullah, don't do that. And he gets the message. So we must not take these things now and make big generalizations that women beat their wives. As a matter of fact, Muslims beat their wives. As a matter of fact, you'll find that it is our responsibility to take care of them in the best. خَيْرُكُمْ خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِهِ وَأَنَا خَيْرُكُمْ لِأَهْلِي. Prophet ﷺ said, the best among you are the best of his spouses. So you have to look at that in those contexts, and may Allah guide us to what is upright.
Any human-made document, no matter how carefully it's written with the best general principles, will constantly need to be revised. You look at the U.S. Constitution, and it has this beautiful language, general principles, but it also allowed for slavery, it allowed for women to be denied the vote, it allowed for all sorts of, terrible things to happen in society, and it needed so much work to try to make it fulfill its promise, and of course until now it hasn't, and many times it was misused. The difference between that and the Book of Allah is that the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, still there are human interpreters. As Sayyidina Ali alayhi salam, or may God be pleased with him, said, he said, the Quran is a book between two covers that does not speak for itself, we speak for it. It doesn't mean it does not have its own meaning. It has the meaning that Allah gave it, but we are flawed human interpreters. But the beautiful thing about the Book of Allah is that it defies the attempt of one person to continually impose his or her will on it, because there are always people who understand the meaning and always push back on it. And you cannot have a book that only has general principles with no specific instances of these things. So for example, if you say, well, there's some things in the Quran that don't exist now, still those specific instances give us a better understanding of the principles behind them. For example, just quickly, when in Surah Al-Mujadala, we have reference to a custom or a practice that the pre-Islamic Arab did that Islam abolished with these verses of the Quran called dhihar. Dhihar, where a man made his wife taboo to him, not divorce, but taboo, so unavailable to him by saying these very vulgar words, you are to me as the backside of my mother. And there she was, mu'allaqa, like hanging between marriage and divorce. It's a very terrible situation. Now, who else practiced dhihar? The Persians didn't, the Byzantines didn't. So once Islam spread beyond tribal Arabia, this wasn't a specific practice that was relevant to them, but it's an excellent example of principles that Islam upholds throughout the Quran and Sunnah, which is that you should not use vulgarity. You should not be ungrateful to someone who has been kind to you. You should control your temper and not say something quickly that's going to damage all these relationships that you've spent years building. So this is such a powerful instance that, yes, that is specific to that time and place, but embodies these principles and values that all of the Quran and the Sunnah uphold. And so that's the work of the scholars, understanding, extracting those rules from specific instances, but we need, as human beings, we need those specific cases so we say, oh, that's what you mean by ingratitude. That's what you mean by cutting off relations. That's what you mean by the damage that can be caused if you are quick to anger.
Thank you.